Dhammapada verses 58 and 59, Garahadinna with 2. The story of Garahadinna. While residing at the Jetavana monastery, the Buddha uttered verses 58 and 59 of this book with reference to a rich man named Garahadinna and the miracle of the lotus flowers. There were two friends named Siddhikutta and Garahadinna in Savatthi. Siddhikutta was a follower of the Buddha, and Garahadinna was a follower of the Nigandas, the ascetics who were hostile to the Buddhists. At the instance of the Nigandas, Garahadinna often said to Siddhikutta, "What benefit do you get by following the Buddha? Come, be a follower of my teachers." Having been told thus many times, Siddhikutta said to Garahadinna, "Tell me, what do your teachers know?" To this, Garahadinna replied that his teachers knew everything. With their great power, they knew the past, the present, and the future, and also the thoughts of others. So, Siddhikutta invited the Nigandas to his house for alms food. Siddhikutta wanted to find out the truth about the Nigandas, whether they really possessed the power of knowing other people's thoughts, etc. So he made a long, deep trench and filled it up with excreta and filth. Seeds were then placed precariously over the trench, and big empty pots were brought in and covered up with cloth and banana leaves to make them appear as if they were full of rice and curries. When the Nigandas arrived, they were requested to enter one by one, to stand near their respective seats, and to sit down simultaneously. As all of them sat down, the flimsy strings broke, and the Nigandas fell into the filthy trench. Then Siddhikutta taunted them. "Why don't you know the past, the present, and the future? Why don't you know the thoughts of others?" All the Nigandas then fled in terror. Garahadinna naturally was furious with Siddhikutta and refused to talk to him for 2 weeks. Then he decided that he would have his revenge on Siddhikutta. He pretended that he was no longer angry, and one day asked Siddhikutta to invite, on his behalf, the Buddha and his 500 disciples to partake of alms food. So Siddhikutta went to the Buddha and invited him to the house of Garahadinna. At the same time, he told the Buddha about what he had done to the Nigandas, the teachers of Garahadinna. He also expressed his fear that this invitation might be a reprisal, and so the invitation should be accepted only after due consideration. The Buddha, with his supernormal power, knew that this would be the occasion for the two friends to attain Sotapaddi fruition, and therefore accepted the invitation. Garahadinna made a trench, filled it with live coals, and covered it with mats. He also kept some empty pots, covered with cloth and banana leaves, to make them appear as if filled with rice and curries. The next day, the Buddha came, followed by 500 bhikkhus in single file. When the Buddha stepped on the mat over the trench, the mat and live coals miraculously disappeared, and 500 lotus flowers, each as large as a cartwheel, sprang up for the Buddha and his disciples to sit upon. Seeing this miracle, Garahadinna was very much alarmed, and he said rather incoherently to Siddhikutta, "Help me, dear friend, out of my desire for revenge. I have truly done a great wrong. My bad designs have had no effect at all on your teacher. The pots in my kitchen are all empty. Please help me." Siddhikutta then told Garahadinna to go and look at the pots. When Garahadinna found all the pots filled with food, he was astounded and at the same time very much relieved and very happy. So the food was offered to the Buddha and his disciples. After the meal, the Buddha expressed his appreciation, anumodana, of the meritorious act and then said, "Ignorant worldlings, lacking in knowledge, do not know the unique qualities of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, and so they are like the blind. But the wise, having knowledge, are like people with sight." Then the Buddha spoke in verse as follows. Verses 58 to 59. As a sweet-smelling and beautiful lotus flower may grow upon a heap of rubbish thrown on the highway, so also, out of the rubbish heap of beings, may appear a disciple of the Buddha, who, with his wisdom, shines forth far above the blind, ignorant worldlings. At the end of the discourse, both Garahadinna and Siddhikota attained Sotapaddi fruition. End of chapter 4. Flowers. Bopaweka.